Greetings, Warlord.
Over 2 years have passed since the last release of the Protectors. Thank you for staying with us all this time. We have been listening to your feedback and kept ourselves busy working on huge new features and content for you to enjoy for the next patch. Though there are a few more details to iron out, we would like to show you what we have accomplished over the last few years and what to expect of the Protectors version 0.9. This patch, as you may have guessed, is huge. It's the biggest patch TPC has ever had and likewise contains the most new features, content and updates. As a milestone patch, 0.9 is intended to finalise the RTS part of the game and provide a solid platform for all patches going forwards. This doesn't mean that there won't be further modifications or tweaks to races or RTS mechanics in future, rather it means that there likely won't be any more core mechanical changes. As 0.9 contains literally thousands of changes, we can't cover each and every one, but we will show you the most significant ones and explain what they entail. Please keep in mind that 0.9 is a work in progress, so what we display may not be representative of the final version. With that out of the way, let's delve into 0.9. As many will have guessed, our first showcase regards the great single-player experience, the Warlords Battlecry 2 campaign. It's back and better than ever. Battle across Etheria against a number of configurable, persistent heroes on a variety of different maps, each with different victory conditions. Defend against and ambush multiple AI players, which take turns to move around the map and attack various provinces. Interact with characters in new ways and discover unique events and even secrets which may profoundly impact the game. Choose between multiple different dialogue choices and make statistical checks, much like in many RPGs. Control regions which grant you bonuses in battle, upgrade them with additional defences, and find unique items which can't be discovered anywhere else. Much like any other campaign, you can change the difficulty and other scenario options to whatever you prefer. Conquer Etheria once again in any way you like. In addition to the new campaign experience, a number of updates have been made to various other campaigns and systems. The new zoom feature makes location selections and visual representations much easier to distinguish for those campaigns which have close-knit domains or locales. Dexterous heroes may now scout the enemy before any battle to find out useful information and better prepare. Keep research has also been adjusted so players start with tier 3 of their hero's faction already researched, and the keep research system itself has been applied specifically to campaigns it was designed for, meaning that campaigns such as the Tears of Dawn can be played as was originally intended. For the campaigns and chapters which retain this feature, there is now a helpful reminder to inform players about the mechanic. Campaigns and chapters have also been continued with new levels, maps and events, and like the rest of the game have been updated to the new patch systems and mechanics, and many bugs have been fixed. Regarding mechanics, let's talk about the updates made to the combat stat. The cloud of mystery it was concealed in has been lifted. Instead of being a nebulous concept, it's now explicit, as in players will know exactly what the value means. Combat is also not as extreme as it once was. Units no longer instantly perish via death blows, nor do they fail to do anything via misses. Damage values have taken on a small degree of chance, which combined with the aforementioned changes, means that combat is less RNG focused. Crit effects have also been re-evaluated, making each near as effective as the other and at all times. In addition, combat no longer works on a comparative basis. This results in two changes. Firstly, the way combat works is now the same for both melee units and missile units, so missile units are no longer at an unfair advantage. And secondly, your unit's value in battle will be much closer to what you paid for it, depending of course on how it's used. As a result, there will no longer be any situations where missile units dominate the game, or any situations where the player needs to beat an army of powerful high combat units and have nothing useful against them. For instance, a level 1 vampire can no longer one-shot a hero on max HP, and an army of Spriggans is no longer useless against a couple of giants, RNG notwithstanding. Damage types, armor and resistance has also been modified. First of all, the impact that damage types have on the game has been lessened, and the impact that unit types, terrain height, and cover have on the game has been increased. This means that there will no longer be situations where a race automatically loses against the other because it doesn't have the right damage types, or the right damage types at the right time. It also means that races can go against one another with minimal pre-game bias. For example, going against Minotaurs using the Undead no longer results in an automatic game loss. Secondly, we have removed the logarithmic armor stat and transformed it into an explicit percentage, so now any player can see exactly how much damage resistance a unit has and how much they will get from spells or abilities such as Stone Skin. Resistance now only affects afflictions instead of affecting both afflictions and elemental damage resistance, so instead of effectively being superior to the armor stat, it fulfills a different function. Thirdly and lastly, magic damage deals damage in the same way as the others, so there is no longer a case where one damage type is better than the rest. Instead, if a unit is meant to ignore all damage resistance, it simply has that ability. All of these changes amount to a less confusing and fairer game. If you win or lose, you generally know exactly why you won or lost, and how you could have perhaps played differently to change that outcome in future. As mentioned prior, terrain now has a strong impact on the way battles turn out. Cover's effects have been homogenized, meaning its rules are now applied across all units equally. Its effects are also now much stronger, reducing missile damage by up to 50% with heavy cover, increasing the number of strategies which can be employed on the battlefield, especially against missile units. Certain terrain types like snow, ice, swamp and desert slow land movement speeds, and some also can't be built on and give negative cover. The importance of terrain height has also been exemplified. It now has a significant effect on damage for melee units, missile units and buildings, and also extends the range of missile attacks against targets which are lower down. As a result, fighting uphill is more costly, whereas fighting downhill is more rewarding. All of these changes make terrain a strategic element worth considering both offensively and defensively. Resources and resource types have also followed 0.9's trend, and have been redesigned so they promote as much freedom and creativity as possible. Instead of having 4 generic resources which are identical in function, 0.9 gives each resource its own special use. Gold is the most plentiful and is used to construct buildings, produce units or research upgrades. Metal is more scarce and is used for the more expensive advanced units, buildings and researchers in the game. Stone is rarer than metal and is used exclusively for construction, and crystal, the least common resource, is used for some researchers but is mostly used for race, building and unit abilities. By attributing each resource to a specific function, each feels more special and more satisfying to use. There are no longer any cases where races have useless or superfluous resource types, and there are no longer any cases where players use spare resources to make poor production decisions. Previously, if for example the opponent had an army which was effective against a specific unit, and if your resource types disallowed you to make any other production choice other than that unit, then producing that unit was better than not producing it, despite that being a poor decision. In 0.9, instead of being forced to produce a redundant unit, you now have the choice to produce whatever you need. These changes also make the game more varied than before, in terms of army composition. As resource types don't prohibit players from certain strategies, they can have whatever army composition and employ whatever strategy they like. If players want an entire army of nothing but cultists, they can do that. If players want a balanced number of different units, they can do that. Or if players want to spread towers all over the map, they can do that too. And even better, the radius limit has been removed, so they can place them next to each other again. The types of resources which mines produce has also been altered. Some of the income which ore mines, quarries and crystal mines produce has been transferred to gold, meaning that players can no longer be barred from playing the game should they lose access to one or more types of mine. Players will always have access to gold, and hence they always have access to basic units and productions. In addition, trade is now available for every race by tier 2 or tier 3, so if players need to procure a certain type of resource, or if they want to strategize around one or more specific types, they can do that. Now back to Crystal. As mentioned before, race abilities, unit abilities, and building abilities now all have a crystal cost. This may seem odd, but bear with the explanation. In older versions of TPC or Battlecry, the cost of spellcasting units was huge. This was because their price needed to account for both the unit itself and its spells. In 0.9, the cost of all spellcaster units has gone down tremendously. The reason for this is that the additional cost which players normally pay for a unit's spells has been shifted to its actual spells. So for example, a Snake Priest in 0.8.9 costs a total of 130 resources by default, whereas in 0.9 it may cost around 80 resources and its spell could cost 50. This allows players to produce and use spellcast units for their missile attack, which is especially beneficial for races like the Undead or the Sarathi, both of which have basic spellcaster missile units. As abilities exclusively use Crystal, and as Crystal is used by almost nothing else, the resource functions as a global timer for a player's abilities. The more Crystal they have, the more abilities they can use, and the faster they can use them. Likewise, the less Crystal a player has, the less abilities they can use and the slower they can use them. The different functionality and resource types also introduces a strategic decision to the game. Do I invest my miners in gold mines and try to control the map early with a large quantity of basic units? Do I invest in metal so I can tech up faster? Do I invest in stone to ensure that anything I take is held or harder to take away? Or do I invest in crystal and make use of the strategies which abilities present? Whereas a certain amount of resource-based strategy was present in previous versions, it was considerably more limited and one track, as in the same types were almost always the most beneficial to invest in every game. In 0.9, as races work differently at each keep level, as maps change battle dynamics and as heroes are geared up for a specific role, the best resource types to invest in can change on a per game basis. As mentioned previously, almost all units command new, powerful abilities which relate to their race's gameplay and the theme of the unit itself. One race's unit abilities may cater towards healing and XP gain, whereas another race's unit abilities may focus on setting up quick battlefield defences. Some races' units may also have access to stronger, higher cost abilities early on, whereas others may have access to stronger abilities later on depending on the effectiveness of the respective race's tier. By giving each race a unique theme, economy and playstyle, and by giving units unique abilities, we intend to shift more of the strategic focus from damage types to the utilisation of races and units, thereby making the game more strategically diverse in the ways which benefit the game most. What's more, each and every race has been thoroughly fleshed out. Not only do they have a strong racial theme via a unique line of researchers and economies, but they now also have answers to common playstyles like poison and disease. Each line of racial researchers caters towards a specific theme, such as crusade or necromancy, and no two races boost their economy the same way, from the income researchers of the knights or necromantic conduits of the undead to the mills of the barbarians and the pestilence of the plague lords. Even each race's efficiency at each tier level is different, meaning that some are better early on in the game, some around the middle and some later on in the game, and their research access also reflects this. Factions have not been forgotten and will also function as originally intended. 0.9 also provides some nifty new features to aid in unit management. Rally points now accept a command queue, allowing your units to fulfill a number of different orders as soon as they are produced. In addition, these new rally points automatically check whether or not a mine is full before producing builders, meaning that a player's buildings won't produce miners if the rally pointed mine or mines are already full. As a result, filling mines in a particular order is now made a lot easier, and without the drawback of accidentally producing excess miners. What's more, using the control key, players can now set the rally points for all of their buildings at the same time, useful for those make or break moments where time is of the utmost importance. A new unit autocast system has been implemented too. When a unit's abilities are middle-clicked, a window pops up where players can set whether or not to automatically cast specific abilities, allowing players to have more control over which abilities to auto-cast and which ones not to. The player's preferences are saved across all heroes as well, so this feature only needs to be set up once, excluding any further player decisions. Now on to conversion. The mechanic has received a number of changes. It's now automatic, much faster, and no longer requires a unit to dedicate itself to the task. Instead, a converter only needs to move within conversion range of a mine to begin conversion. Multiple units can contribute to a conversion, so a building can be converted even faster using multiple converters. Should there be an enemy converter within range of a building, red sparkles will display above it instead of gold, signalling that the mine is being contested and conversion can only continue if all nearby converters derive from one side. In addition, there's no longer a convert button, and conversion orders can be issued and queued by simply right-clicking on each mine or utility that you want to convert. If you need to attack a mine, it's still easy to do via the attack button or hotkey. This means that the gameplay is much smoother, that the game is easier to interact with, and that there is no more converter sniping abuse, where conversion could be cancelled by dealing any amount of damage to the converting unit. No more will a hero spend 50 seconds to convert a mine only to receive 1 damage for an imp, forcing them to restart the conversion all over again. Unit levels have enjoyed a substantial boost. Such a boost, in fact, that they are now around as impactful as they were in Battlecry 3, if not more so. Level ups in 0.9 give percentile bonuses instead of linear bonuses, so unit levels are proportional to a unit's stats. The amount of XP a unit receives is no longer divided by their strength. Instead, unit XP requirements are based on the strength of the unit in question, so a swordsman will have a much lower level 2 XP requirements than a T-Rex. Consequently, a swordsman will be able to level up quicker, especially if it kills any higher tier enemy units. As the gains derived from unit levels are particularly potent for high tier units, they are now a lot more dangerous and can take out entire armies on their own, given a high enough level. Just like in 0.8.9, unit level ups increase ASP costs, though the price is fairer and better reflects the unit's stats. Speaking of unit stats, they have been completely changed. Instead of measuring unit power by their army limit cost, 0.9 makes units feel like whatever they were meant to feel like, sometimes even improving upon the concepts in the original games. For instance, goblins will be cheap, weak and numerous, and Doom Knights will be devastatingly powerful as they were always meant to be. In addition, nearly every unit in the game has its own specialised ability, reflecting both the unit itself and its racial theme. Flyers and the way flying works has also been modified for most units. Flyers which can attack ground units must now dive to attack them, which temporarily changes them into floating units. Diving units still fly above other units as normal, they can just be hit by anything which can attack a floating unit. In essence, this means that when a flyer attacks a grounded unit, the ground unit can also attack back, ensuring that games no longer come down to flying units and units which can hit flyers. In 0.9, flyers can still fly over anything and attack any target of their choosing, and they now also get buffed by researchers like Weaponsmith or Armourer, so flying units are still highly relevant, especially so for slower races like dwarves. Earlier in the video, we mentioned how towers have had their radius removed. This implementation is part of 0.9's new building system, which comprises base buildings and defense buildings. The first keep per side constructs projects a base radius. This radius is permanent, so if that keep is destroyed, the radius will remain. This is the same radius as the keep's conversion radius, so it's easy to keep track of. There are no penalties for constructing base buildings within this radius. Base buildings constitute structures like barracks or stables, and these can only be built within the large radius of a keep building, with the exception of the keep building itself, which can be constructed anywhere. Any base buildings constructed outside of the base radius costs additional resources and takes more time to build based on the distance from that radius. Defense buildings feature structures like walls, towers, and certain economy buildings. Defense buildings differ from base buildings in that they can be constructed anywhere without any penalties. Structures, such as towers, have had their radius restriction removed and replaced with an army limit cost. No building can be constructed within an enemy's base radius. Breaking all of this down, this means that it's more difficult to construct forward bases, and hence they're less of an automatic victory condition. This also promotes comeback, as it's easier for players on the back foot to pick off forward bases which are vulnerable and still under construction, or easier for them to apply pressure across the map. Defense buildings are stronger than ever, and the removal of their radius restriction means that they can be stacked once again. Their army limit cost helps compensate for their combative strength and promotes strategic use and placement. Overall, these changes reduce the formerly overwhelming effectiveness of forward-based strategies, provide more comeback for losing players, prevent tower rushing and offensive towering, and make defensive strategies more flexible without making them insurmountable. In addition to these changes, it is also now possible to see your unit's build queues. By selecting a building to place or by pressing and holding the shift button, players can now see other builders' construction queues, represented by translucent buildings and their grids. The changes to resistance and how it affects afflictions has been mentioned previously. To elaborate, in 0.9, it affects both physical and psychological afflictions in the same manner. Just like with psych afflictions, physical afflictions, such as poison or disease, can now also be resisted for an extended duration, similar to the way units resist fear or awe. Not only does this mean that psychological and physical afflictions are more on par with one another, but it also means that things like psych affliction attacks and physical affliction auras can now properly exist in the game without causing problems, both of which we've put to good use. In addition, many new afflictions have been created for a number of different units, buildings, and spells. Confusion, for example, makes a unit attack any nearby unit regardless of its side, and Silence prevents a unit from using their spells and abilities. Certain effects can even inflict more than one affliction at the same time. The Ghoul, for example, can inflict both disease and ghoul plague with its attacks, weakening its victim until it becomes a ghoul itself. The ability to field massive armies has become much more possible. By default, instead of buildings giving army limit, players get whatever army limit is set in the options menu, depending on the keep's tier level. Players start with a lower amount of army limit, and as they upgrade their keep, they get more and more army limit until tier 5, which gives players the value as set in scenario options. Any army limit bonuses acquired from morale, skills, perks, or research are added onto this value. What this means is that it's possible to reach extreme amounts of army limit without having a base the same size as the map. The editor is also one of our main focuses in this version. In addition to the army limit change, maps can now determine the maximum army limit themselves, so each map can have its own preset maximum army limit. This gives a lot more power to map makers, and it also provides a lot more flexibility for map development. As map sizes, terrain and resources all have an impact on the optimum army limit setting, the ability to preset it provides players with the best experience for that map without the need to adjust any scenario options. For instance, there could be a large map with lots of resources and a high army limit, or there could be a small map with fewer resources and a small army limit. No matter the map design, maps can now have whatever army limit is most suitable for them. If a player wants to play a map with their own army limit setting, it's still adjustable in skirmish options should they want to modify it. Numerous new tiles will also enhance the map making experience. From extended ramps and cavern entrances to badlands and even clouds, map makers will find a great deal more flexibility and support to help realise their creativity. What's more, a translucent version of the selected tile will display underneath the cursor, allowing map makers to see how the tile will look before placing it. Navigation has never been easier, as most lists are alphabetized and displayed in a right-hand sidebar, making it easy to find and place any tile. Any SFX features now also play their sounds in the editor, so map makers will know exactly what their maps will sound like. Events and NIST scripting have received many changes and features too. Not only are there more conditions and effects, but they can also be renamed, allowing map makers to identify events with ease. The ability for any event to have up to 4 effects also expands their flexibility even further, allowing them to trigger multiple different effects and scripts simultaneously without the need to resort to flags. A variety of new options and side-related features have also been added. Victory conditions can now be selected and locked via an option, meaning that map makers are now able to create maps for specific game types. For instance, they can make a Team Conquest map complete with a number of capture points, a survival map with a triggered victory, and many more unique and original skirmish concepts. In addition, AI sides can now have pre-configured heroes. Everything is configurable, much like hero creation, so map makers can give them whatever name, race, class, level, and even skill set they like. This option can even load and use a player's own heroes, meaning that anyone can potentially fight alongside or against a player's own creations. Extending this customizability is the new Advanced Diplomacy feature, complete with a new neutral diplomatic disposition. Just as in the original game, teams can be set in the sides panel. However, Advanced Diplomacy allows sides to be neutral to other sides, or have a pair of allies which are enemies with one another. Shared vision can also be turned on or off for any side, allowing for unique scenarios where a side can see an enemy side or neutral side, or can't see an allied side. Even the neutral side is included, meaning that sides can be set to be neutral or allied with neutrals, and vision can potentially be shared. In summary, these editor changes not only add a great deal of efficiency and usability, but also provide mapmakers with more power than they have ever had before. They may now create completely new scenarios, missions, campaigns, and concepts with the new version of the editor. AI is one of the main focuses of 0.92. Not only do they use each race better, they also know how to build heroes and utilise their spells. The AI knows how to produce specific types of units, how to predict danger, how to defend their bases or allied bases, how to protect or destroy mines, how to retreat armies, when to cast certain spells, and more. The result of all this is that the AI is much harder to play against. Don't expect to win every game against AI opponents, as they now have the means to manage their units, heroes, and buildings to legitimately defeat human players. The Skirmish AI hero panel is also fully adjustable, so players can build an AI hero to fight against or even choose another one of their own heroes to fight against as they please. Whilst heroes are mostly going to be addressed in 0.9.1, we have made some changes to them too. As is expected, they have been updated to 0.9 systems, and certain skills and perks have been switched around and revised. One of our big changes to heroes is that they no longer have a spellcasting chance. Instead, spells are always cast at a specific level, depending on the caster's expertise. Spells are unlockable and are leveled up based on the hero's intelligence and ritual skills, rather than leveling up each spell individually. This means that splashing into multiple spears is easier, and that there will no longer be any situations where players invest 70 mana in a spell only to have it fizzle and cost the game. To accommodate this change, spells have also been re-evaluated. Those with higher costs are now much more efficient than those with lower costs, so there's more incentive to wait for high cost spells. Also, spells which were detrimental to gameplay, or spells which were too niche, have been changed or removed. For example, spells like Intoxication and Yumorgia's Touch are no longer present in 0.9, and have been replaced with spells which are much fairer and less abusive. Others, such as Home Portal or Divine Peace, have been updated with new effects. Home Portal now summons a portal structure which can teleport units to another portal, and Divine Peace now prevents all units and buildings from attacking within a specific radius. In 0.9, there will be many new and updated hero spells to explore. Psychological traits such as Good, Evil, Experimentalist and Traditionalist have been addressed as per user feedback. These traits no longer have any impact on RTS gameplay, meaning there is no need to grind for the perfect trait setup, and there are no grievances when they change outside of player control. Instead, traits only affect the RPG side of gameplay, such as campaigns, quests, events, and multi-choice dialogue. Currently, they have no impact on certain campaigns and quest lines, but this will be updated in a future version. Talking about heroes, items have received many changes. There are 2 new item slots, necklaces and belts, both with plenty of new items. In addition, any spell school bonus which an item has provided has been exchanged with access to specific spells. This means that not only do items give access to spells which are potentially higher up in a spell sphere, but they also provide these spells natively to any hero so that they can be cast at the hero's spellcasting level. For instance, a Chronomancer can pick up an item which gives access to summon Imp, and they can cast that spell as well as they cast Haste. In addition, items are now upgradable. Clear the dust off that Dwarven short sword and give it a new edge, or pick up an old gnarled staff and upgrade it into a legendary artifact. Item upgrades work similarly to hero level ups. When an item is upgraded, you get skill points, which can be invested in any of the item's positive abilities. Items can be upgraded at a variety of different locations, such as in the campaign or by the in-game item smith, in exchange for some crowns. And, once an item has been fully upgraded, you can personalise it with a name of your choosing. For those with a fairer or more competitive game in mind, Handicapping has been updated to fulfill this role properly. Instead of giving weaker heroes additional army setup points, Handicapping gives them bonus skill points. The number of skill points awarded to the weaker heroes based on the difference between the strongest hero's skill points and items, and the weaker hero's skill points and items. The bonus derived from Handicapping lasts only for the duration of the match, meaning the affected hero reverts to its original skill point total at the end of the battle. By levelling a weaker hero's strength for a match, players can enjoy a fairer game, especially if the level difference or item strength difference between heroes is particularly high. Another big change regards the retinue system. Tired of leaving a favourite unit behind because of their massive army setup point cost? Well, now they can be acquired in any battle. Similar to heroes, Retinue can be purchased and resurrected mid-battle, and players can always recognise special units by their golden aura. Retinue units also have all of their abilities unlocked by default, meaning a player can fire off whatever Retinue unit ability they like at any stage in the game. Our last substantial change to heroes is that they'll now be portable to the next version. From 0.9 onwards, heroes from past versions will now be supported and respec'd. You'll never have to leave your hero behind again. That brings this video to a close on the Protectus' new features. Let us express again that this video doesn't account for all of them. There are so many updates that it's impractical to go through each and every one of them, especially in detail. However, our changelog is linked in the description below for anyone interested in reading through them. It's great to see that we can share our love for a truly remarkable franchise, and likewise it's great to see that so many take interest in it, and how creative and passionate they are. So we'd like to say thanks for your continued support for all this time. We wouldn't be here without you, so thank you. 0.9 is a major milestone on our roadmap, and we hope it's going to be something new and special for you, and that we can continue to contribute to this project and the wonderful Warlords franchise. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Farewell, Warlord. We shall meet again.